Good morning, everyone, and welcome to First Things First. Yes, Wilds, your hair looks amazing. I would have gone with bangs, but pulled back. I like it just as well. Nick Wright, Brandon Marshall, and the aforementioned Kevin Wilds. And speaking of Wilds, what a grudge match in the AFC East last night with your Patriots, buddy, and those tough winless Jets. I mean, that was a game.
Relax, Jenna.
Let us start there. Jets and Pats. New England needed a win to stay alive in the playoff hunt. Jets needed a loss to stay alive in the hunt for Trevor Lawrence. Jets in command through 3 quarters, but Cam and the Pats scored the final 13 points to escape. Yes, I use that word, escape, with a 30-27 win and avoid total disaster. Jets remain a disaster at 0-9. Here's Cam Newton after the win.
I'm more relieved not having the feeling of losing, because there's a lot of people in that locker room, that deserves, more than what we have been showing. A lot of our fans have been let down with the lackluster performances of myself, amongst other people, but I only can speak for myself, and I will. But yet, this is a game that we can build off of, and we will build off of it, and that's a good thing.
Nick, look, a win is a win in the NFL, and everyone goes towards your record. But maybe you think the Patriots could use this particular win as a way to kind of kickstart the next half of their season, this potential playoff run?
Well, their playoff chances are slim. They're not quite to none. And the win last night, I suppose, kept them alive. But it obviously was a less than resounding victory against a truly awful opponent. And if you're a Pats fan, the one thing this year that you've been able to hang your hat on is your secondary. And the secondary let Joe Flacco play like it was the 2011 playoffs. So that's none of that is good for New England. But Brandon, to me, the issue for the Patriots is this. You weren't yet on the show when I laid out my full game-by-game preseason picks. I picked the Patriots to start 4-6 and make the playoffs, because I thought they could pile up some wins at the end of the year. And I think they are going to start 4-6, because I think they'll lose next week to Baltimore and then beat Houston. What I didn't factor in there was that the Buffalo Bills were going to start 7-2. And so now the question is, what's the worst case scenario for Buffalo? 9 wins? What's the best case scenario for New England? 9 wins? When the other team's worst case scenario lines up with your best case scenario, Brandon, you're still alive. But I don't think yesterday was going to make people feel overly optimistic given their performance.
Yeah, I mean, I would love for this to be the case. And I was torn last night watching the game because I'm cheering for my Jets. Obviously, that's my team. But I also was cheering for Cam Newton. Last week, we talked about how important Cam Newton getting this team back on track is, not only for the Patriots, but for Cam Newton's career. So I was torn on who to actually root for. But the reality is, Nick, this is over for the Patriots. When you look at the AFC, you got Buffalo, Miami, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cleveland, Tennessee, Indy, KC, Las Vegas. There's no chance for them to creep into the playoff discussion. I mean, statistically and from a number standpoint, can they still get it done, Kevin? No. But if you want to put blame on anyone, you can look at your quarterback, Kevin, but also you got to look at Robert Kraft and also Bill Belichick, the GM, because they haven't gotten it done this year.
No, I will not look at either of those people. And when I do, I will look at them with admiration. There is a small chance we make the playoffs, but I got to start rooting against the Bills, and I got to root against Tua. It's just not the way I want to live my life, Nick. But here's the silver lining. I feel like we're already in the playoffs. Last night, I'm up there cheering at midnight for a field goal to beat the terrible Jets. I'm like, we're in the playoffs. This is fantastic. I've never had this before. Jenna, this is what it's like the last 20 years of my life, because I didn't grow up like this as a Patriots fan. It was just kind of always, and Nick, you're going through this right now with the Chiefs. It's just like a romantic comedy. It's like, there's some bumps along the way. Oh no, they might break, but then it all works out in the end. And now it's like an action movie. I got no idea what's going to happen. There's all sorts of dangers jumping. You know what, Nick? on the last drive, I'm like, we might just fumble the ball and lose the game. It's so exciting.
Well,
I've never been in this spot with like losers like you, Nick, when the Chiefs have this long history of losing. I love it.
Losers like me. That's funny. Wiles, you know who also is experiencing that for the first time in a long time, or for some guys in forever? The Patriots. Brandon, did you notice how they celebrated last night? I cannot remember the Patriots and even Belichick showing emotion on the field goal, celebrating a win in the regular season, much less a win against the most poorly coached team arguably in the history of the NFL. And so I can't. I thought it was fascinating. Like, Belichick gave the fist
Watch
pump.
Cam Newton.
You never see that from him. Cam, I got it from Cam a little bit because of the relief, but the way the Patriots celebrated here against the Jets was, to me, almost a concerning sign of where they know their season is, Brandon.
100%. I actually noticed that too. And Cam Newton was pushing guys off of him like, this is the Jets. He wanted to celebrate.
Yeah.
He gave a few fist bumps. He smiled a little bit, then really quickly.
And then he composed himself.
This is the Jets. This is the Jets.
Yep.
Loved it.
All right. Well, speaking of the Jets, let's jump across and talk about the Jets. Joe Flacco in for Sam Darnold last night. Almost won this game for New York, although Jets fans probably happy with the end result. A step closer to Trevor. Jets, the only winless team, followed by Jacksonville. They're at 1-7. Then you got that NFC East contingent, Cowboys, Giants, Washington, at 2 wins to round out the top 5. Back to you, Nick. Should Jets fans be happy this morning?
Well, I think if I were a Jet fan, God forbid. Oh, my God. I put myself in that position for a moment. That'd be terrible.
You're still a Chiefs fan.
I would be happy. No, the Chiefs were never the Jets. Chiefs had most wins of any team in the 90s. Look it up, America. Chiefs were never the Jets.
That's so long ago.
I would be happy they lost.
To the 90s?
The 90s.
Made the playoffs a couple times in the aughts as well. Stop it, guys. We're not talking about the Chiefs. I'd be happy I lost because of the Trevor Lawrence factor. I, though, have a question for anybody. I want an answer to this so much, I'll pay for it if anyone can get me documented evidence. Okay. Who called the Flacco bomb? Up 7. Patriots just had a 17-play, 9-minute field goal drive. You're in the 4th quarter, and this is a brilliant play call if you want to lose. But ostensibly, the people calling plays are trying to somehow save their jobs. What do they care about Trevor Lawrence? They're never going to get to coach him. The only time Adam Gase is going to get to meet Trevor Lawrence is if he's taking his orders somewhere. So it's not going to happen. So, like, if someone explain... Oh, no, it's not unfair. There's no level of unfairness.
I mean,
someone explain this play call to me. Explain that. So Flacco just went rogue?
30%.
So Flacco just went rogue, Brandon?
No, it's not go rogue. It's like he has an option. 30% of the time, he's going to take the shot. This is a shot play. It's not a bad call. So when you look at it, look at the guy in the flat. 70% of the time is supposed to go to that guy right there. He can run for 15 yards. But look, to answer the question, if I'm a Jets fan, and I am, this win does nothing for you. We actually have a resident Jets fan on our show. He's a producer. I don't want to call him out. And I was talking to him this morning, and he said, look, I woke up this morning. I didn't finish the game because I had to get up at 3 in the morning. You called him out. You threw him under the bus. Yep. Sam Pepper. I asked Sam this morning. I said, Sam, you tell me, what's your thoughts on this as a Jets fan? And you've been following this team forever. And he said, I woke up happy to see the score this way. And I'm like, well, Pep, for me as a player, I'm actually pissed off because, I want to win. This doesn't feel good. So I think it's this battle between fan and player. Fan, I don't want to win. I want the quarterback. Player, I want to win. I don't care who you're drafting next year.
Keep in mind, it's just a shot at the quarterback. Go ahead, Wilds.
Oh, sorry. I want Nick's take on this real quick. I thought this was bad for Sam Darnold because the Jets stink seems to wash off everybody else. It's like, oh, Le'Veon Bell's actually good. Jamal Adams is actually good. And I was like, sure, Sam Darnold's actually good. But to see Flacco get in there and really move the ball, I think that the idea of like maybe we keep Sam Darnold is dead after last night.
I think that's absolutely right, and it hurts Darnold because now they're more likely to get Lawrence. I do, though, Jenna, I have to acknowledge what just happened on the show. It's in a generation of embarrassing moments for Jet fans. I don't know that anything has ever been more embarrassing or a bigger indictment than Brandon's brain just assigning it is such a badge of dishonor being a Jet fan. I won't say Pepper's name out of respect for him. Like Pepper showed up naked to the Zoom. Like, we got a producer today who forgot to put pants on. We got a producer, I'm not going to say who he is, who's
It's a tough morning for Jets fans.
Well, I didn't know if he wanted me to give his
his name. No, Pep. His name's Pep. He's a Jets, Mets, Knicks fan.
Sam
in Wisconsin
Pepper,
sports.
we love
Stinks.
you.
Poor Pep.
Our condolences
You guys are bad
for being a Jets fan. You were born into it. We are learning more about why the Bucs laid an egg Sunday night to the Saints. Fingers are starting to point. We'll have that story in what direction next. First things first.
Wilds, I was too harsh on Gase. I went too...
On Friday, it is the Big Ten Showdown. Iowa takes on Minnesota. It all starts at 7 Eastern. That's on FS1 and the Fox Sports app. On to Tampa now. Dust starting to settle after the Bucs' terrible loss to the Saints Sunday night. Tom Brady had his full complement of offensive weapons for the first time, and yet, well, that offense generated only 3 points to go along with Brady's 3 picks. Let's add a little salt there. Head coach Bruce Arians possibly calling out his quarterback for not getting the ball to Mike Evans. Take a listen to this.
With him being the best receiver on this team, why isn't Byron making a more concerted effort of getting Mike involved in the passing game earlier?
Mike was open a bunch in that ball game. He just didn't get targeted. That's all. He was open. Mike was open.
Nick. What the expression on your face is Bruce Arians calling out Tom Brady there? Mike Evans was open. He didn't get the ball.
Well, he didn't get the ball. Byron Leftwich schemed him open. Mike Evans got open. He didn't get the ball. There's only so many people left to blame. So, yeah, I think he's kind of calling out Tom Brady. And I want to let the audience know something. Yesterday, I had some people in my life reach out to me after the show. Some were pleasantly surprised, and some were very disappointed in me because they said I was too easy on Tom Brady yesterday. And my response was multifold. One was, I don't believe in elder abuse or kicking a man while he's down, so I didn't feel the need to pile on. The other was,
Not fair.
I knew this story would continue throughout the week, and so we can kind of, mete out the Tom Brady criticism in doses. And the Bucs don't yet have a Mike Evans problem, but they have the beginnings of a Mike Evans problem. Deontay Johnson, Hayden Hurst, Darnell Mooney, just to name a few people who have more targets and more targets per game this year than Mike Evans. Mike Evans is averaging 5.5 targets per game. Gronk, who 6 months ago was the WWE 24/7 champ, is getting 5 targets per game. And if not for these goal line passes where he's gotten a bunch of 1-yard touchdowns, he would be on pace for far and away the worst statistical season of his career. So, Brandon, it doesn't feel yet to me like Tom Brady has developed a rapport with Evans, and I don't think that bringing in Antonio Brown is going to further that Tom Brady-Mike Evans relationship, which should be the most important relationship on the team, and I think Arians knows it.
Nick, you have a good point here, but you know me, I think you're starting to learn how I like to approach things. I like to peel back the layers, and I like to ask the question, why? Why is this happening? So to answer what you just said, he's been banged up at a wide receiver. We talked about this 2 weeks ago when they brought in Antonio Brown. Bruce Arians went around to all his wide receivers and asked the question, how healthy are you? One guy said 80%. Mike Evans said 85%. Another guy said 90%. As a wide receiver, if you're dealing with an ankle injury or a hamstring, you're not going to be productive. That's just point blank, period. Look at all the other wide receivers that deal with injuries. You can't play wide receiver if you're dealing with those injuries. Now, that has nothing to do with this question, Jenna, as far as, Mike Evans and being locked down by Marshawn Lattimore. Like, I'm sitting here watching the film right now on my iPad, and this kid is just doing a phenomenal job. There's something going on here between this matchup. It reminds me of my days against Darrelle Revis. I got the coaches involved. I got the quarterbacks involved. I said, look, my ego's at stake here. So a lot of times we're talking about Tom Brady. I can see how, it looks like that and feels like that, but could Bruce Arians possibly be trying to massage Mike Evans' ego? This guy had 5 matchups against this kid, and he has 10 catches, 123 yards. That's 12 yards a catch. So for me, it's more about Mike Evans than it is about Tom Brady, because this guy had plenty of opportunities to beat him. Look at these plays that we're showing. He can't throw a back shoulder. He can't throw a fade route. He's literally strapped down. But then you see this defensive end taking the slant away. So there's more to this discussion. That's why I want to dive a little bit deeper into the film, because this is a big deal right now.
So, but Lattimore, Brandon, was tweeted out, better luck next year, on how he locks down Mike Evans. I think this is Bruce Arians trying to give Mike Evans a little bit of a confidence boost. I don't think there's anything to do with Brady necessarily. Maybe it's like one of those Russian dolls. It's inside the Brady criticism and inside the Byron Leftwich criticism and inside the Mike Evans criticism is actually a shot at Lattimore. You have to go really far down, Bruce Arians. So, Nick, I think this is just all about, Arians trying to boost him up and trying to take a shot at Lattimore.
Yeah, I'm going to go, maybe I'm wrong. I'm going to go Occam's razor. I'm going to say the most obvious solution is probably the right one. I'm going to say that Bruce Arians, who in their first matchup of the year, when Brady threw 2 picks against the Saints, criticized Brady and then walked it back. And then in their next matchup against the Saints, their biggest game of the season, when Brady threw 3 picks, he seemed to me to be defending Leftwich, defending Evans, and putting the blame at the feet of Brady. Now, maybe it's all some mind meld manipulation, and again, I haven't broken down, and to be totally honest, I'm not really capable of breaking down the coach's film, certainly not the way Brandon is, to see how many times Mike Evans was open. But Brandon, I do think, or Wilds or Jenna, you 3 all can do it. I am a blind man in the woods on that. But I do think, Brandon, let me postulate this without having broken down the film. Mike Evans is not running a ton. He's running some, but he's not running a ton of intermediate routes. He is a deep down the field threat, among other things. And when Brady is getting pressured, and he was getting pressured in this football game, he is not waiting for plays to develop. He is not waiting for a guy, to get open on a deep post. He is, if he sees the pressure, he is looking to his check down, he is looking to his slot, he is looking to his tight end. So I wonder if some of this was Tom Brady's eyes move from upfield to downfield when Arians is watching the film earlier than he would have liked, because Cam Jordan was pass rushing, because he was dealing with rushers at his feet, and he just wanted to get the ball out of his hands. To me, that's a very viable and plausible possibility from this football game.
Makes sense.
It could be, Nick, but there's so much to it. I was actually having this conversation with on their podcast, breaking down this very matchup, and there's so much more to it. And I actually dove into my matchups against Patrick Peterson. I dove into my matchups against Darrelle Revis. I would literally go to my quarterback, Matt Moore at the time in Miami, playing on Monday Night Football. Darrelle Revis ended up taking a slant route. He picked it off, and I think it may have even been a pick 6, 99 yards. And I was so ticked off because all week I was preparing for this very route. I told Matt Moore, I was like, Matt, my feet has to match up with your feet. I'm going to have a millisecond of time where I'm going to be open, and you have to be on point. Soon as my left foot plant and hit the ground, you have to let the ball go, because if you don't, the ball's going to go the other way. I'm going to come off, I'm going to work him, I'm going to chutter, and then I'm going to take off. And as soon as I take off, the ball got to be in the air. He was off by just a hair, and the ball went the other way. Now everybody's looking at me saying Brandon got shut down against Darrelle Revis in the red zone, but the reality was I beat the guy. And we talked about it all week. So there's so much more when you go to the individual matchups. You got the play caller putting you in position, and also, Jenna, the quarterback, right? Like, we have to be on the same page. So Tom Brady, to me, why aren't you guys using the back shoulder? Why aren't, as far as in the field, not red zone, because Lattimore has his number down there, but why aren't you just throwing the ball up and letting this guy go make a play?
I think there's one other avenue here to look at, which is, and Wilds, I'll throw it to you quickly on this. Everyone remembers Brady's year with Moss. He had more than 1 year, but the magical year in 07. But that was when Randy Moss's stock was an incredible low. The Patriots were able to buy incredibly cheap, and it worked out as well as any quarterback-wide receiver combo ever has. Aside from that year, Bill Belichick, even before the weapons were all awful and the offense had fallen apart, never prioritized a Mike Evans type of receiver. He prioritized slot receivers. They had a litany of great ones there. Tight ends, running backs who can catch. So I do think, Wilds, it's possible that even though, and I know everyone says Nick hates Tom Brady. Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback of all time. No one disputes it. It's possible that even as the greatest quarterback of all time.
Doesn't mean you don't like him. Doesn't mean you don't like him.
Right. Okay, sure. But the point is that even as great as Brady has been his entire career, Wilds, that his particular skill set has never matched up perfectly with Mike Evans' skill set. And maybe that's why the Patriots, aside from Moss, never targeted this type of receiver in free agency or the draft. And what we're seeing right now is, who is Brady finding? Scotty Miller, Gronk, the various tight ends they had on the roster previously before injury. Like, I think
similar
that
to the
is
kind of weapons they had in New England. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I think maybe they had those weapons in New England, not just by coincidence, but with Brady and McDaniels being with Belichick and McDaniels being with Brady for so long, they understood these are the weapons he can utilize the best, as opposed to a 6'5" monster #1 receiver.
Yeah, I buy that, especially now that he's getting pressured. He got pressured 46% of his dropbacks. He's just going to be looking for, his version of Hall of Famer Julian Edelman out there, rather than Mike Evans, scooting down the field, Jenna.
We'll have to look far, because I haven't seen him.
He's hurt right now. Wow.
You got it in.
He's in the
Check it off your bingo.
Hey, Brady, guys, Brady might have played his way out of the MVP chatter. Who does that leave as serious contenders? You might be surprised with the list out there right now. We'll have it for you next. First things first, although if you're watching video, you probably already know. So our friends over at Fox Bet have updated their NFL MVP odds. They've still got Russell Wilson out in front despite his shaky performance Sunday, but hot on his heels, Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. Both former MVPs, both big State Farm stars. What are you wearing, Jake from State Farm? Both back in the MVP conversation after big numbers this week. Oh. Brandon, my friend, who are you putting your money on?
That's interesting.
In the MVP race.
You like that?
I know, but it was just like the ketchup and stuff.
Oh, it's Take Integrity.
I
learned this from
their
Nick Wright.
commercials are not ruining their season. That's interesting. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, if you look at the numbers, you'll see that they aren't ruining their season. They're able to do both. Brandon, who's your guy in the MVP race now? Russ, Mahomes, or Rodgers? That's weird. Am I missing that Baker should be on that list? Oh, no, he's not. He's making commercials. Russ, Mahomes, or Rodgers? Who are you putting your money on?
Jenna with the shots. Listen, Take Integrity. Nick, I appreciate you teaching me and all young broadcaster and analysts on television around the world. Thank you for teaching us what Take Integrity is. I chose Russell Wilson before the year, and I'm going to stick to that. And when you look at it, MVP, most valuable player, it got to go to Russ because of how difficult his job is. He's playing with the worst defense in the history of the game. Mahomes right now, I'm not even putting Aaron Rodgers in it right now. I still need to see a little bit more. I don't know how this team goes from trending in the right direction to trending in the wrong direction. Like, I need to see them beat a really good team before I even put them there. But going back to Russ, worst defense. Patrick Mahomes have the 6th best defense in the NFL. And you also have Andy Reid. You have Bieniemy. You have 3 #1 wide receivers, and I'm adding Kelsey in that as well. Yep. Of course, this guy is going to have everything he needs to be successful. So for me, it starts with Russell Wilson, and it ends with Russell Wilson because his job is more difficult.
So here's the thing. I do think that should matter. I do think incorporating supporting cast, coaching, how much is asked of a player should matter. And if things are close, the guy with the more difficult job should get the edge. So I think your line of reasoning there is very, very good. Unfortunately, right now, it ain't close. One guy has his team in position to be one of the top 2 seeds in this conference and has 1 turnover on the year. The other guy has 10 turnovers on the year. All their numbers, Russ, Mahomes, and Rodgers, are nearly identical except for the turnover numbers, and that is the worst thing a quarterback can do. Rodgers on the season has 3 turnovers, and 1 of them was returned for a touchdown pick 6. Russ on the season has 10 turnovers. 1 of them was returned for a touchdown and pick 6. Mahomes has 1 turnover. And I learned yesterday in watching some of the Brady analysis that Mahomes' turnover doesn't even count because it was a heave on 4th and 7. Exactly like Brady's final pick of the game. So Mahomes' 1 turnover actually was a good play he's supposed to make. So according to America, Mahomes actually has 0 turnovers. And so Russ had been brilliant, but 7 turnovers in the last 3 games drastically changes the hierarchy of MVP here. And it's not that he can't overcome it, but Mahomes is on pace for 45 touchdowns and 2 picks. If that pace continues, Wilds, this is not going to be close. Mahomes is going to run away and hide with league MVP. And I just feel like for Russ, the 4 turnover game and the 3 turnover game just kill him.
There's also a circus element to Mahomes' play, Brandon, that I think he just looks like the MVP. Like, put your numbers aside. When you're watching all the games, you're like, that guy's the best player. He's making underhand passes. He's doing little, long passes. He's doing handoffs that count as touchdowns. He just looks like the MVP. But Brandon, and I know you subscribe to Take Integrity, although you've got a new subscription. I'm gonna give you an out here. This is like Take Integrity adjacent. An addendum. Here's a way to think about it. Guys can play themselves off the MVP list. I would argue Russell Wilson lost him that game in Buffalo, so he's out. Aaron Rodgers did his little meme thing, and then he got crushed, so he's out. Josh Allen was never really in. Tom Brady just laid an egg in Tampa Bay. He's out. There's 2 guys on teams that have played really well and that haven't had a bad game. One is Patrick Mahomes. The other one, your guy Big Ben. You can still have Take Integrity because you have your Steelers Take Integrity, and you can have a little add-on of Big Ben for MVP. He's undefeated, and they were 8-8 last year, and now they're undefeated. Like, well, I don't know, guys. When I wasn't here, we were 8-8, and now we're undefeated. So I think it's a 2-person race between Big Ben and Patrick Mahomes. Take that one. It's a free one for you, Brandon.
I can't take it. No, absolutely not. Wow. So look,
take it.
I'm starting to get really comfortable on this show. And Nick, the first thing that I do every single day, when I wake up, is I think about you. I say, you know what?
I'll take it.
What's Nick Wright's angle on this? And Nick, I got to be honest. You're getting super predictable. I knew you would go this way. I knew you would go. You would talk about the turnovers. So answer me this, Nick. Kurt Warner had 5 multiple turnover games when he won MVP. Brett Favre had 3. Peyton Manning had 2. So how do you answer that? Patrick Mahomes, he also had the similar journey that Russell Wilson is having right now on his path to MVP. So if that's what you're standing on, then you need to have a defense behind that, because the history has shown that MVPs in the past have had multiple games where they had several turnovers, whether it's a pick or a fumble.
That's true. That's true. You're absolutely right. Kurt Warner, I think, famously in 01, because of all the fumbles, when you said 5 multiple turnover games, I think it was 5 3+ turnover games, which Russ has 2 of. So you're absolutely right on your history there. So let me address both of those critiques, or both of those issues. One is, you mentioned Patrick Mahomes in 2018, where he had 12 interceptions and I think 2 or 3 other fumbles. I know he lost some fumbles in that Rams game, that high-scoring Rams game. So he had 15, 16 turnovers that game. I remember it well. The reason he was able to overcome that is the closest other contender for MVP, Drew Brees. He had 18 more touchdowns than Brees and 1,000 more passing yards. So if Russell Wilson was on pace to crush the field in yards and in touchdowns, then you can set the turnovers aside. But right now, Russ and Mahomes are on pace for about the same amount of touchdowns and about the same amount of yards. So because of that, you can't set the turnovers aside. And Jenna, the other point is like, Russ's turnovers would not be enough to knock him out of this in a normal season. And again, we got half the year left, so we'll see if Mahomes has a game like this. But of these 3 guys, and Wild said it, Rodgers lost his team a game against Tampa. Russ lost his team a game against Buffalo. Patrick Mahomes hasn't done that. So as long as he continues to not have a bad game, he's going to be the leader in this race, Jenna.
He has the best supporting cast in the
integrity.
NFL.
So I'm taking Ben
That's
Roethlisberger.
true. That is
My
true.
lines are just landing. My lines are landing. They're all landing. Time now for In or Out. According to a report yesterday, multiple front offices believe LaMelo Ball will be the #1 overall pick in next week's NBA draft. Oh, yeah, we switched gears. We're talking some basketball. The report says the T-Wolves, or a team that trades up, are the most likely to land LaMelo. Nick, you in or out on LaMelo going #1 overall?
Yeah, in this very odd year, I don't think it'd be a bad pick. I think Wiseman would make sense for some teams, but not for the Timberwolves. I think Anthony Edwards could make sense for some teams, but not for the Timberwolves. So if the Timberwolves stay there, I would take LaMelo if I were them. He has the most upside. His size is outstanding. He's got to fix his shot. So I got no problem with it. But the Timberwolves, keep in mind, they don't have their pick next year. So they might want to package this for a later pick and a player who can help them win right now, because they're trying to make the playoffs in the very crowded Western Conference. But if they stay there, Jenna, then I would take LaMelo Ball if I were them.
Hey, is D'Angelo Russell still a point guard? He still handle the ball? Call me old-fashioned.
Yeah.
Your old buddy KW. You know what I like? 1 point guard per team. That's it. It's the same reason Wiseman doesn't want to go to Minnesota. He's like, they already got a guy playing my position. So, and I know he was on, D'Angelo Russell was on JJ Redick's podcast, like, no, I kind of like it. It'd be like when I was in Brooklyn with Karis LeVert.
Everybody has a podcast.
Just have 1 point guard a team, please. Just have 1 point guard. We've already gone through this with Minnesota when they're drafting multiple point guards. Just 1 point guard. It's not hard, Brandon.
Go ahead, Brandon.
I'm all the way in on this. Nick, you said it. He has the highest upside of everybody in the draft. He's a big point guard, and he can be probably one of the best scorers in the NBA as soon as he touched down. I like it. He has a long-range shooting game. He needs to work on his shot selection, but this guy can easily come in and impact his team right away. I love this. He is the best in the NBA draft.
JJ Redick has a podcast. I'm going to have a podcast with my friend Marnie. The New England Patriots somehow needed 13 fourth-quarter points to beat a winless Jets team. That's the good news. The better news, guys, Cam Newton took a step forward. Take a listen.
It seems like you've been more efficient as a passer over the last couple of weeks. You haven't thrown any interceptions. What's been the difference over the last couple of weeks versus maybe the few weeks that preceded these games?
I'm getting tired of sucking. Simple.
They put a truck in the studio. Time now for Drawing a Blank. Cam Newton willed the Patriots to a comeback win over the Jets last night on Monday Night Football. Finished with 274 pass yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Brandon, Cam Newton's performance last night was blank.
Definitely a relief. I mean, when you look at the stretch he's had, it's tough. I think the toughest part of the job is maintaining your confidence when you're not playing well. So for him, going into that locker room with the win has to feel really, really good right now.
Brandon, I'm going to take it a step further, and it's going to seem hyperbolic, but I think it was career-saving. Nick, what are you talking about? If he, let's say he turned the ball over on that drive after the Flacco interception, and they lose. The Patriots season is over at that point, officially done. I would imagine they would seriously have considered, for some reason, going to Stidham just to see what he can do. And I don't know what the market would have been for Cam if he finishes this year losing 4 or 5 games in a row, turning the ball over a bunch.
Right.
So I'm not saying his career is back on track now, but a bad performance yesterday, Wild. And I think it would have been on the board that that's all we would get to see from Cam Newton.
Yeah, I buy that. That would be his last start in a bad way to end his career that you lost to the winless Jets. I, however, went with blitz defeating. Cam was getting blitzed more than any other quarterback in the NFL. So the old Adam Gase said, hey, we'll blitz him too. Got pressured on 46% of his dropbacks. No worries. Cam did his little dump offs, got the W. So blitz defeating.
There's a big screen pass
on to Cleveland, where reinforcements are on the way for Baker and that Browns offense. Running back Nick Chubb set to come off IR after missing the last 4 games with a knee injury. Brandon, Nick Chubb returning to the 5-3 Browns is blank.
Much needed. They had their worst 4 weeks running the ball with this guy gone. And this is the recipe for their success, is running the ball and play action. So to get this team, this team is actually playing okay, but to keep this team on track and to continue to get better and make a run towards the end, they need him running the ball really well so they can set up the play action and get Baker Mayfield a little bit more comfortable in the passing game.
I like that answer. I like this answer more. Nick Chubb returning to the 5-3 Browns is bad for my buddy Brandon. You know why? Play Houston this week. That's a W. We need Jameis here to eat them up. Play Philly the next week. Philly could win that game. Then you play Jacksonville. That's a worst case scenario 2-1, potentially 3-0. And if they're sitting there at 7-4 or 8-3, I don't care how many commercials Baker Mayfield does. Y'all are going to have to quote a wise man, put some respect on his name. Because I've been told just win games. Just win, baby. We're all Al Davis. So Nick Chubb, one of the most underrated running backs in football, a guy who almost won the rushing title last year over Derrick Henry. It's bad for my buddy Brandon.
Okay. Your old buddy KW likes to be a uniter, not a divider. If I have an option, I don't go out and character assassinate anybody. But I specifically chose this answer to divide this team and just to make Jenna mad. And then make Nick mad. Oh, no. So I'm really dividing here. I went with commercial free. I looked up how many commercials Nick Chubb has. He just has one McDonald's thing. So I watched the spot on iSpot, and he doesn't even in the commercial. It's just that it was a Browns commemorative cup, and they had to list him as one of the people in it for some sort of,
because he was busy practicing.
So Jenna, why doesn't Baker invite Nick Chubb to one of his commercials? No, so he can focus on football, Jenna. That's what should be happening.
Or Baker can take a page out of Chubb's.
Can I say something, Jenna, about the Baker commercials?
I try to get people mad.
He has this
and I
year,
like him, by the way.
He has one new commercial. It's a Hulu commercial that he isn't even in. It's a deep fake. That's the whole premise of it. He didn't have to show up. He didn't have to go to set. He didn't have to do anything. It's somebody skinnier than me, their body, next to skinny Saquon Barkley. It's not even a real commercial, and you're blaming him for it. The insurance commercials he did 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
No, they did a bunch of new stadium ones this year. The groceries, he drops his key this year. this year covered the book. This year, I can name 10. Nick, he's done 10. The whole time he could have spent practicing, learning the playbook better. On to Dallas now, where Stephen Jones was asked again if first-year head coach Mike McCarthy will be back next season. His answer, absolutely unequivocal. So, Brandon, the Cowboys saying Mike McCarthy will be the head coach in 2021 is blank.
Very Jones-like. I mean, they held on to Jason Garrett for 10 years, and a lot of people say it was a little too long, and I'm one of those guys. But this isn't a bad characteristic to have as an owner. A lot of times we listen to the fans. A lot of times we listen to the alarmists like Kevin Wildes. I love when a team stays packed, sticks to the script, and try to figure it out. Now, if he goes into next year and they have the same results, he shouldn't make it through the year. But I like this. Keep it together. You get Dak Prescott healthy. And what they were doing with the ball in his hands was pretty cool to see early on in the season. They just had to eliminate the turnovers.
Can I just tell the audience something real quick about Brandon Marshall, the nicest man on sports television? Brandon right now is in Florida. I'm in New York, yet I can read Brandon's mind. The reason Wildes got thrown under the bus there is because Brandon didn't want to take another shot at me because the last few segments have been a little contentious. So Brandon's like, I should probably say Nick here, but Nick and I kind of getting into it, so I'm just going to say it's Wildes. Wildes has done nothing. Wildes has not attacked the Cowboys at all, and that is 100% what just happened there. Now, I'm going to say it's bad messaging, though, to answer the question, because if I were the Jones family, I'd want McCarthy to feel like, man, if we don't get it together and win this division, this could be one and done for me. I also didn't like that Stephen Jones was like, no matter what, Dak's our quarterback next year. Dak's probably your quarterback next year. You also might end up with the third pick of the draft, Dak coming off injury and unsigned. So I just thought this whole thing was bad messaging, Wildes.
Okay, two things. One, I feel like using the term one and done feels too like University of Kentucky. It actually sounds cooler than just going on for a Cowboys coach for a year and getting fired. It's like, wow, is he going to the league? Okay, I said across the hall to Brandon, because I sent Brandon this tweet if we could put it up. I thought this was fascinating, and I wanted some more context. Check this out. Mike McCarthy said on 105.3 The Fan during their bye week next week, the Cowboys will do something they call across the hall, where defensive coaches work with the offensive players and the offensive coaches work with the defensive players. Brandon, I have no idea if this is the smartest thing I've ever seen in my life or just reeks of desperation. Can you please convince me one way or the other?
Yeah, this isn't common, Wildes, but I like it because, I always thought the people who had the best perspective on who I was as a player was the people on the other side of the hall. So every single year going into the season, I would have Coach Bowles or the defensive back coach who we went against every single day with one-on-one drills just break me down. Look at my film and tell me where my tendencies are, where my challenges are, where I can be better. What do I excel in? So I actually like this. I've always wanted to spend time on the defensive side because I felt like it would make me better as a wide receiver. This is smart. We'll see how it turns out for them the second half of the season.
Cool. All right, let's talk some Steelers now. 8-0 for the first time in franchise history. Mike Tomlin now clinching his 14th straight season without a losing record. So, Brandon, we'll spin it forward 8 games. Your Steelers going 16-0 would be blank.
Wildes MVP, Ben Roethlisberger. The answer to the question would be my dream come true. First year on this show, doing this show 5 days a week, and to stand up here and say, this is going to be my team that comes out the AFC and it happens, that would be amazing. So look, dream come true.
So my answer is the following. Impossible. Now, what's the analytical backup I have for that? None. What's the statistical backup? Okay. None. Here's why it's impossible. Okay. There are 2 teams that have gone undefeated in the history of the NFL. The 72 Dolphins, who had the #1 offense, the #1 defense, and the #1 special teams, an unbelievable all-time great team, and the 07 Patriots, who had the single greatest offense I've ever seen and a very good defense. The idea that this Steelers team that has a very good to great defense and an average offense is going to join that list is impossible. So I don't know who's beating them. I just know they're not going 16-0. Big Ben went 15-1 early in his career. We forgot about that team because they weren't a special team. This is a good team. This is not a special team. They're not going 16-0 wild.
Okay. I wrote Fool's Gold because, as a fan of the Patriots, I wish we lost that final game against the Giants when we had to play them again in the Super Bowl. I'm like, I wish we just
lost. You did lose the
and kinda
final
healed
game
up.
against the Giants. You did lose the final game against the Giants.
Cut his mic. Cut his mic. Gosh darn it. That one burns me still. That's the only one I'm upset about. Randy doesn't get a ring. Brutal.
Sorry, wow. I got to move on. Back to New York now. The winless Jets are still winless and yet still in the pole position for that #1 overall pick. Almost messed it all up and won the game last night. It's so on brand for them. Brandon, your Jets going 0-16 would be blank.
Yeah, my Jets. Jenna, could it be light at the end of the tunnel? When you look at these quarterbacks that they've had since Joe Namath, Ken O'Brien, Vinny Testaverde, Richard Todd, Boomer Esiason, out of his prime. Look, I love some of these guys on this list. I can even throw my man Ryan Fitzpatrick on that list as well. But at the end of the day, they need a quarterback that can come in and be the face of the organization, be the CEO of that locker room for the next 10, 15 years. And they could potentially have that in Justin Fields. They could potentially have that in this kid in Clemson if he wants to come to the Jets. I'm not going to even say his name anymore until he tells us that he wants to play in New York and not for the Giants, but for the Jets.
So, Brandon, I amazingly also said light at the end of the tunnel, except it's not light, it's a Mack truck, and it's about to flatten the Jets and all their fans' hopes and dreams. Listen, it would be deserved and appropriate. This team deserves to be an 0-16 team. Adam Gase deserves to have 0-16 on his resume. It feels like he's been building towards this his entire career, and now it's finally within his grasp. They've been poorly run and poorly coached. They had some talented players on their roster over the last few years. They instantly alienated them and shipped them out of town. And they have found a way to ruin Sam Darnold. I don't know if Darnold was ever going to be great, but he was considered the safest pick. The guy who maybe his ceiling wasn't the highest, but his floor was higher than everybody else's. Instead, they've ruined him in 2.5 years. So if you're a Jets fan, I don't know what to tell you other than, you'll probably do the same thing to Trevor Lawrence.
I agree. I put Trevor Lawrence kryptonite down there. I'm not convinced that Sam Darnold's not good. Jamal Adams is good. Le'Veon Bell is good. Ryan Tannehill gets out of Adam Gase's system, and he's good. But Nick, just one thing, Kattanik. Nick has got a little bit of extra vitriol. A little bit of extra vitriol for Adam Gase. And you know why, America? If you were on Twitter last night, you saw a historic performance from Nick Wright, who, when the Jets were driving at the second half, Nick Wright gets on there. Let me take a shot at Adam Gase. What are they doing with Joe Flacco? Yeah. And then, boom, touchdown. Yeah. It is the shortest half-life. It's like one of those flies that's like born and dies in like an hour. It was so small that your window of take relevancy.
Correct.
Was out.
I predicted a Joe Flacco. Jenna, I predicted a Joe Flacco back-breaking interception in the first half. Instead, it was in the second half. I was a little early on it. I was just a little early on it. I knew it was coming. I knew the Flacco turnover was coming. He had it ready for us.
I want to get your take on this Saints corner, Marshawn Lattimore, really enjoying locking down Mike Evans yesterday, retweeting Evans' stats from their last 3 matchups. 6 total targets, no catches, and said better luck next year. So, Brandon, Marshawn Lattimore pulling out Mike Evans is blank.
Woo! Salt in the wound. Everybody's talking about it. We've been talking about it all week. and then this guy tweets this. That's salt in the wound. It reminds me of my time against Darrelle Revis. Look, going for 40 yards against Revis, 60 yards, 80 yards wasn't good enough for me because I knew everybody was talking about it. You'll see the highlight, you'll see the graphs. Oh, he shut down this receiver, shut down that receiver. They matched up 5 times. He's had 123 yards. That's 12 yards a catch, 0 touchdowns. Like, this is an ego play for a wide receiver. So Mike Evans is too good of a wide receiver not to produce against Marshawn Lattimore. Something needs to give, and it needs to give fast. But he has to wait potentially a whole year if he doesn't see him in the playoffs.
Yeah, I got to say, to me, this is confusing. Not Lattimore calling him out. Lattimore's success. It's like, oh, Brandon's like, yeah, I remember my battles against Revis. Oh, you mean future first ballot Hall of Famer, the greatest cover corner of his generation, Darrelle Revis? Yeah, you're supposed to have some battles there. Marshawn Lattimore is not currently the best Ohio State corner in the NFC, much less Darrelle Revis. How does this happen? Mike Evans is great. Lattimore's pretty good. How does this guy in 5 separate instances shut him down? It's just confusing to me, Wilds. I don't understand it.
That's fair. That's fair. I took it at face value. With all the trash talk that we're seeing online, some of it really incendiary. Say, hey, better luck next year. You did a good job. I got the best of you. Keep on trying, buddy. I thought it was a really nice gesture.
I don't know why we're airing everything out on Twitter. All right, we got to move on. Did Bruce Arians call out Tom Brady again for not getting Mike Evans the ball? Hear from him next. Poor Mike Evans.
Nick would say yes.
Saturday, historic Big Ten programs square off on FS1 as Sean Clifford leads Penn State against Nebraska. It all kicks off at noon Eastern on FS1 and the Fox Sports app. All right, on to Tampa. So Tom Brady had his full complement of offensive weapons for the first time Sunday night. It still wasn't enough to get the offense going. Brady, just a brutal game, threw 3 picks. And now head coach Bruce Arians possibly calling out his quarterback for not getting the ball to Mike Evans. Take a listen to this.
With him being the best receiver on this team, why isn't Byron making a more concerted effort of getting Mike involved in the passing game earlier?
Mike was open a bunch in that ball game. He just didn't get targeted. That's all. He was open. Mike was open.
Nick, was Bruce Arians calling out Tom Brady again there?
Yeah, I mean, if he was, it's a little unfair. I mean, Brady was hitting the open receiver for the majority of the night. Most of those guys were wearing Saints uniforms, but they were pretty pinpoint passes right to those guys. He was going lollipop in the air. But so let's just go with what we know. We know week 1 of the season, Brady threw a couple picks against the Saints. After the game, Bruce Arians said one of the picks in particular, Mike did the right thing, Tom did the wrong thing, and then later apologized. We also know that this was, as far as playoff leverage, retracted the statement, that's fine. Playoff leverage, this was the biggest game remaining on the Bucs schedule. They played their worst game of the season. Brady played the worst game he's played in years. They got annihilated, and Mike Evans, their all-pro receiver, the most, at this point in their careers, the most talented player on the Bucs offense, continued to be a lightly used possession receiver, which he's never been at any point in his career. And now we also know the coach is saying he was open. I don't know what the problem was. So I don't know if that's calling out Brady or if that's just simply saying, I thought Byron Leftwich did a good job game plan-wise. I thought Mike Evans did a good job breaking free of Lattimore, who's had his number throughout his career, yet for some reason or another, we couldn't get him the football. And so I don't think like Arians is trying to start a war with Brady. I do think, though, he made the conscious decision, Brandon, to defend his offensive coordinator and his number 1 wide receiver at the possible expense of his 43-year-old quarterback.
Yeah, and I'm not shocked that you see it this way. Anytime Tom Brady's in a discussion, you're always going to find an angle to put it on Tom. To me, this is about Mike Evans and massaging his ego. As a wide receiver, you know, you got to think about this. Look at the last matchups. Everybody's talking about it. 3 matchups. He had 2 targets, 0 catches. That's a big deal. I just said it in the last block how the hardest part of this job is maintaining your confidence when you're not playing well. Well, this isn't playing well, especially when you're going against Marshawn Lattimore, and you talked about it. This isn't. I respect him. He's really good, and he's very feisty. He's really feisty, but it's not Champ Bailey. It's not Darrelle Revis. It's not Patrick Peterson. So for this to happen, it's really alarming. So for me, this is a really good coach doing a good job of massaging his wide receiver's ego, just making sure that this guy's mentality, his mindset is still where it needs to be.
I agree. I agree with you, Brandon. I'm gonna get send a message to some of our younger viewers and younger analysts like Nick Wright. Here's what it's like to be a little bit old, around Tom Brady's age. There's a lot of things that you can't do, that are hard to do. One, it's hard to exercise without stretching. You can't just get out there and start running. You got to warm up. It's hard. Number 2, hard to have more than like 1 or 2 drinks. We're like, I'm going to ruin the entire next day if I have another drink. Number 3, hard to get insulted. It's just tough. Like when you're a kid, when you're in your 20s, even when you're in your 30s, so it's easy. You're just taking insults. You're like, I got to fight back. Then once you're 40, you're like, I can't really get insulted. I just can't. You can, Katanic, if you want to get in my ear and give me some insults, I'll still just keep doing the show. It's fine. And I think with Brady's accolades, he really did. I think with Brady's accolades, like, I've got 6 Super Bowl rings. I'm rich and famous. We had a bad game. It's fine. Coach, if you want to throw me under the bus, it's fine. You're not gonna take Tom Brady down a notch. It's totally fine, Nick.
So I don't think Tom Brady's talking to his therapist about it. I just think it's indicative of maybe a bigger issue. I think Tom Brady's going to be fine, but the whole he has 6 Super Bowl rings, I think is a somewhat irrelevant point when Tom Brady is very on the record. What's your favorite one? The next one. He's just focused on getting Super Bowl ring number 7 and division championship number 18 or whatever that would be. And in my mind, both of those ships may have sailed. I also think, Brandon, we have to consider this possibility. The Patriots, aside from Moss, and Moss was a very unique situation, the 2nd greatest receiver of all time at an all-time low point as far as what his cost would be, they bring him in. Aside from that, they never once gave Brady a Mike Evans-like receiver. And a lot of people thought that was them doing Brady wrong, that they should have. Maybe it was them understanding Brady better than other people did. That Brady what he needs is great slot receivers, guys that can run option routes, excellent if you can have reliable tight ends and running backs who can catch the football out of the backfield. Because that's how they built those teams. You didn't, aside from Moss, ever have a guy like Mike Evans with Brady have a monster year. And when you're seeing Mike Evans get five targets a game, just a half a target less than Gronk is getting, or half a target more than Gronk is getting, I do think we're seeing evidence that Tom Brady, he is not looking for Mike Evans as much as a quarterback normally would look for his number 1 6'5" monster receiver, because maybe that's just not the way he operates.
I think there's some validity behind what you're saying, Nick, but then you got to look at how they use Gronkowski and their tight ends back in the day. They used those guys as wide receivers, and when you go back to the first week of this season, they were trying to use Mike in those same exact situations that they put Gronk in New England, putting him outside, throwing him up, throwing him the back shoulder, the jump ball. That pick that he threw to Mike Evans that you just talked about, Bruce Arians retracting his statement, that was a Gronkowski route. That was a seam down the middle versus cover 2. So what happened after that? Mike ended up getting banged up. So for me, the reason why Mike is not involved as much and his production is low is because of his injuries. It's hard for a wide receiver to produce at a high level when you have a nagging hamstring or a nagging ankle issue. And Mike Evans is finally getting back to form. So for me, the next couple weeks will say a lot.
Well, I just want to, but despite the way this team played, despite that terrible loss, Bruce Arians still a believer. He said, quote, I don't think our confidence is shaken one bit. Nick, scale of 1 to 10, where should the Bucs' confidence level be right now?
Brandon Wilds got upset with me last time I did this because I said 4.5, so I've adjusted. 4.6. Gave him an extra 1/10 of a point. Listen, folks, they're going to be on the road the whole playoffs. Brandon, they're going to be playing Wild Card Weekend, and they're going to be on the road the whole playoffs. So I don't know how I can have more confidence in them than I would have right now in the Oakland Raiders, Vegas Raiders, are going to be in the same position.
Something is wrong with you, Nick. It should be a 10. You have a quarterback. You have an offensive line. Wilds took us through that last week. You have all the weapons. You add Antonio Brown, and you have a top 5 defense. Why wouldn't it be a 10?
Is that to me?
Wilds.
I think it's. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I'm not worried about fanless playoffs, Nick. I think the travel's fine, but the fanless playoffs I don't think are going to affect Tom Brady.
Okay.
That's why I said I don't think it's a big deal to be on the road.
10.
No. Well,
Okay.
fans.
Yeah.
Undisputed
Give up home
coming
field.
up right now.
Who cares?